Jason Hill Books presents Moving Parts, a memoir by Jason Hill, narrated by the author. Prologue. I was standing in Mama's living room, hoping we had not arrived too late for whatever she had planned, when she came out of her bedroom and almost immediately started going off on me. It was dark outside. A brisk December chill followed my daughter and me into the house, and we'd hurried to get there once we realized, that of course there were no thrift shops open on New Year's Eve, as we'd hoped. I was content to skip a third holiday family get-together anyway and just go back to the apartment with my little girl, with whom I was recently reconciled after a long estrangement. Robbie, my daughter, stood glum and worried a few feet away in the middle of the dining room, while her father tried not to fly off the handle. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but I had already pushed through the door. Robbie had on round white framed glasses and a denim jacket to stave off the frigid temps, and was about to take it off when her grandmother, a diminutive yet old and strong woman, commenced her minor tirade. Mama's short hair was streaked with gray, uncombed and unkempt, and her eyes had black circles around them, but still she reminded me of the mama she'd been when I was a boy, selling Mary Kay and performing in plays and theater productions. Even her cheekbones were headstrong, but the skin was peppered with blackheads and darkened from all those summers exposed to the San Antonio sun. I was concerned about Christina, that's all, I said from the island in the kitchen. Well then, for Christ's sake, you could have checked with me first, Mama muttered. It's my car. She was in her bathrobe and barefooted. When she came into the living room and raised her objection, I found her dressed in it, the body of the womb that carried me, in a long pea-green robe and house slippers. Plus, she has to be there by 7 in the morning, and it's all the way in Stone Oak, I said. I feel sorry for her, geez. I thought that's why you got a second car anyway, so we could do things like this, help each other out if needed. We're supposed to be celebrating and happy. It's New Year's Eve, for goodness sake, but all you have is piss and vinegar. Christina started crying and came over to me and leaned her head on my shoulder. She hadn't done that in years. I pulled out a 20 and a $5 bill and gave them to her. A late Christmas gift. Mama was taking stock. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy, Mama said, shaking her head ironically in her pea-green robe, coming closer. I'm leaving, I said. I turned to my daughter. Do you want to stay here, Robbie, or come with me? With you. It had been almost 5 years since I spent any real time with my daughter. Not since that terrible night 4.5 years ago that disintegrated our family and began the nightmares. I pulled out my cell phone and ordered a lift, and Robbie went into her room and began packing. We walked up the stairs to my floor. Princess was meowing, as she did whenever I came home, signaling that she was thirsty for water, and the apartment was silent except for the intermittent squeak of the fire alarm, signaling it was thirsty for a battery replacement. I put some Tyler, the Creator, on the Bluetooth, hoping the music would lighten the mood. I looked around the room. Everything was in order and chaos. There was the pull-out sofa sleeper I'd gotten for $40 back in August that she could sleep on. The position of articles in the kitchen and the refrigerator had never bothered me before, but as Robbie examined the contents of my pantry and cupboards and whatnot, Now I was painfully conscious of it. The pantry was not being used for its designed purpose and utility, foodstuffs, and instead was stuffed with papers and notebooks. Robbie shook her head. She said she would take me shopping the next day for staples, as she called them, and some much-needed household cleaning products. My little girl, once afraid to visit, wanted to upgrade her father. I could never have scripted an end to the year like this. The year of the pandemic. I felt triumphant. It was the best of years. It was the worst of years. It was the age of pandemic. It was the age of possibility. It was the year of civil unrest. It was the year of uncivil war. It was a season of hope. It was a season of fear. It was the epic of the big lie. It was the epic of the little virus. In my early 40s, I found myself rudderless, and the true way was lost. Now, 4 months away from my 50th birthday, I clawed my way back, pulling myself up from my bootstraps, and had done quite well for myself for someone still officially below the poverty level. After years of homelessness and unfulfilled potential, I had 7 books under my belt, all self-published, all written during the Trump years. No great shakes, really, but still toiling in relative obscurity. Not bad for a guy on Section 8. The dove finally came back with a green sprig. But after seeing my apartment through my daughter's eyes, I hated myself. Hated my fridge, my pantry, and my messy bedroom. She had to do something, so we went on New Year's Day to Target, where I spent about 2 bills on the same stuff we could have gotten for $50 at Dollar General. We were getting into the lift with our bags, putting them into the trunk, when I asked her. She'd cut her hair a long time ago. It was a short furrow now. My little girl's long black locks were gone, but she made her new asexual look work too. She was beautiful, but I was biased. What about the ending of the 7th book? What didn't you like about it? I wouldn't have said, "Don't be a crybaby, Dad." And what would you have said? I asked, smiling. I would have said it's all right for men to cry at the end of movies because I don't believe in toxic masculinity or patriarchal male roles. Is that right? She looked at me. I'm not the same little girl you knew years ago, Dad, she said. I've changed. I understand that, Robbie. Okay then, smarty pants. Just how am I supposed to write the end? Just tell it how it happened, Dad, Robbie said. Just tell it how it happened. Chapter 1. I broke my front teeth. It's my earliest memory. I was 5 years old, and we were living in a suburb of Chicago called Matson, Illinois. Sprawled out on the classroom floor, I finally faced up to the grim reality, put a hand in my mouth, and felt blood. Intending to make a joke, I made a fool of myself. I was in 3rd grade, attending a lily-white elementary school a few pristine blocks away from where we lived. As a young black boy, I stuck out like an alien. But at that moment, I was reaching my hand to where my 2 front teeth were supposed to be, finding them missing, and tasting blood as the late morning sunlight shone indifferently on the classroom's linoleum floor. I cried. I tasted the blood and felt the horrible cracking of my own 2 teeth against the floor after when what was supposed to be me pretending to trip and fall over this girl's outstretched legs in the aisle between our desks inadvertently turned into an actual trip and fall, my two front teeth taking the brunt of the impact, all for the love of comedy, all to no avail. I cried again. Mama rushed to the school. "Mama, my mouth's bleeding," I bawled. I was covering my mouth, holding a gauze against it, given to me by the school nurse. Mama took me from the school nurse's office and threw me in the back seat of the car and told me to keep calm as she hightailed it to the dentist. She told me to lay down and just keep that gauze to my mouth until we got there. Daddy was at work exterminating termites and other pests in lower middle-class suburbia in the age before cell phones, and he couldn't be reached, so Mama stopped home and grabbed Mark, my older brother, and brought him with us. Mama, in an uncharacteristically soothing tone, asked what had happened. Curled up in the back seat of our '75 Buick Regal, holding a napkin to my chatterbox, I was finding it difficult to explain at the moment. When we got to the dentist's office, they put me in a chair and leaned it all the way back. The dentist leaned in real close while he attached something to what was remaining of my two front teeth. Somehow they had found the chipped off bits of my teeth and grafted them back on. How they did that still amazes me. Tony Bennett had left his heart in San Francisco. My choppers on the linoleum floor of a third-grade classroom in Matson, Illinois, on the eve of the Iran hostage crisis. As we left, I heard the dentist telling Mama that I was well behaved throughout. Inside, I was screaming, but I stayed quiet. He squeezed my hand and told me I was going to be okay. "Your mouth's going to be swollen like that and you're not going to be able to feel anything for a while, chap," he said. "But it'll go away in a few hours, I promise. There's also going to probably be a tiny little yellow line where we put the teeth back. It's nothing to worry about." He squeezed my hand again and gave me a sucker. His office was small and green, with bright lights and everything metal. I took one last look at the tiny metal instruments he and his crack staff of dental assistants had tortured me with. Mama grabbed my hand and I stepped from the patient's chair and we walked out into the waiting area. Outside of the corner of my eye, I was aware of a hidden figure buckling over and grabbing his stomach. It was Mark, laughing. Mama said I could miss school for a few days. She drove us home while I watched the tops of trees and the tops of houses and the white clouds go over me as shadows in rapid succession through the backseat window. They said it was called a tooth graft. "Mama, does this mean I get to get out of the draft?" I asked. She smiled and said I didn't have to worry about the draft because President Carter had gotten rid of it. Besides, the last helicopters had already flown out of Saigon a few years ago anyway. The war was over. Peace with honor. I didn't want to be drafted and become a baby killer, I said, a common moniker for the veterans who had returned from Nam. But that wouldn't happen. The generation that was too young to remember World War II, too young to remember a depression, too young even to vote, from that generation, Mama said, came all these wounded young bloods who had returned in droves from Southeast Asia. And now it was her turn to conduct an interrogation. "How did this happen? Do you know how much this is going to cost me? Are you being bullied at school? Did someone push you?" She did everything but ask who ordered the code red. I was pretending to trip, I said. What? I was pretending to trip and fall over this girl's legs who had them stretched out, but not fall. Are you crazy? What are you doing pretending to trip over a white girl's legs anyway, huh? Mama asked. Huh? No answer for that one. But it was easy, I thought. You just put your legs together and blow. What'd you say? Nothing, I said. Nothing. Returning to our little green house on the corner, I met what seemed total indifference inside. Daddy was upstairs in his office practicing his acoustic guitar. Julie, my younger sister, was off somewhere in the house, no doubt busy being what Granny called fast, a loose term meaning, well, loose, and way too grown acting for her age. Or a polite way for old folks to say that girl is on a one-way express ticket to the pole, 'cause if she keep acting like that and looking the way she look, you can best believe these little boys out here gonna be trying it. Every Sunday, we went to the Kingdom Hall. We would arrive shortly before noon in the same hall, used also by two other congregations, one 2 hours before us and one 2 hours after. If a spiritual conclave was a sandwich, we were the meat. For several minutes we stood outside in front of the main doors with the other families, while the adults chatted amiably amongst themselves. We spent a lot of time looking up, wondering what they were talking about. Next, the crucial keynote address inside. A 40-minute talk, given usually by one of the elders or ministerial servants, and never by a woman. Women who were still free from being expected to know a damn thing about doctrine, were nevertheless just as zealous for the truth as their husbands were, and at times just as biblically erroneous. But we all need a little church. This wasn't a traditional church, though. For one, there were no crosses anywhere. They believed Jesus died on an upright stake, not a cross. The cross was anathema to them. And during the next 90 minutes, we learned the truth of Jehovah's kingdom, how it would soon subdue its enemies, any day now, and establish a new heaven and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. Upon entering, I suddenly felt filled with joy, a joy I could not understand or explain, but that I nonetheless gladly embraced. The Kingdom Hall was neat and clean. Everything was carpeted. The main area seating about 120 chairs in sections of 3, the largest being in the center, including the 2 steps leading up to the small stage and podium or lectern. Behind the podium was a large, beautifully depicted multicolored painting of an earthly paradise where veritable United Nations of races were not killing each other and were peacefully coexisting and grinning like school children, as they had already long since turned their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Confronted every Sunday with such a larger-than-life oil canvas of eternal bliss, how could you not fall in love with it? Looked a lot better than this place. One doesn't forget the sequoias blackening against the sunset, bathed in a veil of lilac shadows, and shepherds feeding among the lilies, the eerie gleam of a crescent moon in abeyance, cumulus clouds dissolving in columns of mist, a new Garden of Eden for all flesh, with none to make them afraid. You didn't have to be a plumber to be mesmerized by such a pipe dream. Whether or not you would be counted worthy to inhabit such a future paradise That was, well, another story. I got the sense that whoever this Jehovah was, he had some of the grown-ups walking on eggshells. Sometimes other families, those presumably not so steadfast, would disappear and never be seen again. Disfellowshipped. Based on logic? Hardly. But oh well. I liked it. Around me were people of all different races and ages, all coexisting in discipline and unity and doctrinal harmony. For according to the witnesses' doctrine, much in life was sacred. Marriage was sacred. The family circle was sacred. The blood was sacred. Literally, the blood. We were forbidden by the governing body in New York to give or receive blood transfusions. Everyone spoke in calm, polite voices. It was so hushed even the congregational singing sounded like whispers, melodious whispers, that the world was a scary place, that most people on the outside didn't believe what we believed, or how we believed, and that these people on the outside could be loud and immoral and even sometimes dangerous. These were problems of which I was just becoming aware, problems that eventually my young generation would be expected to solve. But how? I also liked that it seemed a true meritocracy. There were black men who were elders over white men in certain cases, and in my young mind somehow this seemed equitable and fair to me, although I wasn't sure why. Elders were the top positions in any congregation, and they were filled only by men. Just below them were the ministerial servants, below them the pioneers. The same was true in every one of the thousands of kingdom halls scattered in over 100 countries around the world. One day I went up to one of the elders and asked why only 144,000 people were going to be allowed into heaven. I told him how much I liked the idea of living forever on earth. But I wouldn't mind, I added, seeing God up close and personal. Well, I'm sure that pleases him, the elder said. But it depends on Jehovah's will. When Daddy wanted to know what it was I was talking to one of the elders about, I told him it was about going to heaven. How do you know if you've been chosen? Why aren't you going, Daddy? I was told I love this system of things too much. You mean this world? And that's how you know? I asked my father, looking up at him. One of the elders came over to me at the house one day and heard me playing that song by George Benson on the radio. Or trying to, anyway, he said, laughing. The song about Broadway? Yeah, that one. So you can't go to heaven then? I'm still trying to be something in this world, he answered. Make a name for myself. That's one of the ways you know. Mark said, Why do I gotta go? My father said I ain't got to. What did he say exactly? Mama asked. He said, tell your mama she can take her 2 jungle bunnies with Jeff anywhere he want. But you ain't gotta. Is he on his way to get you now? Yeah. Daddy, what are jungle bunnies? I asked. I'll tell you later, Daddy said. Later that afternoon, he sat down on my bed and started telling me and my younger sister, Julie, all the yelling in the house that day had something to do with Mark. I heard it more and more, but I never knew what it was about. And I never knew that Julie and I were, well, jungle bunnies in the eyes of Mark's dad. I thought he liked us. Mama and Daddy had been preparing to take the 3 of us to a JW District Assembly in Joliet over the weekend. But Mark, who was 15, hated the religion. So he called his dad and had him come all the way from Chicago to pick him up for the weekend. Your mom should have had Mark's father keep him in Chicago longer than just the weekend, Daddy said, since he's never liked it out here in these fancy schmancy suburbs. Or me, for that matter.